very good evening to all. On behalf of the Research Institute and its director, Robin Sillen SJ, I, Lindsay Lobo, the program coordinator at SNRI, am happy to welcome all to this international webinar organized by Satyanelayam Research Institute as part of the SNRI virtual ZSS seminar. Oppression is one of the most pressing issues of our times and is one which is very much visible in almost every walk of life. This is the theme of our webinar on the quest for dignity, the philosophy of the oppressed. Now, dignity itself is a highly controversial concept. Few other terms have been used in so many settings with so many contradictory meanings. Political events in the various parts of the world in recent times have given dignity many different meanings. Some analysis have gone as far as calling the revolutions and the civil wars that have dominated the world in the early 21st century as the dignity revolutions. Dalits constitute about 16% of India's total population and exist on the margins of the Indian economy. In comparison to non-Dalits, 61% more Dalits do not have access to any land ownership. The discourse of caste has inflicted multiple kinds of violence on Dalits, such as untouchability, occupational segregation, lack of access to common resources such as water, and exclusion in the context of education and employment. To resist such discrimination, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar led an important movement for Dalits' rights in India. He argued that caste created two significant difficulties for Dalits to access dignity in spirit of citizenship and equality. First, Dalits were required to exhibit a sense of reverence towards upper castes and Brahmins. And secondly, Dalits' demonstration of reverence diminished their self-esteem. The reproduction of caste-based social relations is contingent on constructing essentialist notions of identity-based inequality for Dalits. However, in recent years, many attempts have been made in order to construct the dignity of the Dalits. The presentations that we have for you today will shed some more light on this theme. As we gear to participate in today's international webinar, I would like all to have a moment of silence and thus bring to mind the various kinds of movements or struggles related to dignity that we may have encountered. Before we dive into the theme of dignity, SNRI is glad to launch out two new initiatives for this year. I now invite Satya Balan, a teaching faculty at Satyanelayam, to shed some light on these new initiatives at SNRI for this academic year.
Good evening, everyone. Satyanelayam Research Institute is happy to launch today 3 national level competitions, which include short essay, short story, and photography competitions. The competitions will be based on the theme In Search of Meaning, inviting the participants to elaborate on the sense of meaninglessness encountered during the coronavirus pandemic, as well as expressing their journey in the pursuit of meaning during these difficult times. The registration for the triple competitions will be possible through the website of Satyanarayam Research Institute from the 20th July 2021. 15th September 2021 will mark the end of the online registration. The last date for online submission of essays, stories, and photographies is the 16th November 2021. The results will be announced on the SNRI website on the 15th December 2021. The awards will be presented on 28th January 2022. The competitions are aimed at higher secondary, UG and PG students, as well as the MPhil and PhD research scholars. The rules, guidelines, criteria for evaluation for each of the competition will be available on the website of SNRI. There are attractive prizes to be won. For any additional information, you can contact us at SNRI Gmail ID, snriconf@gmail.com. IMPRIMIS. Satyanarayam Research Institute is glad to launch IMPRIMIS, a one-year certificate course that aims at finding the students interested in research and imparting in them the methodology and skills necessary for systematic research and finding. This program is open for all the students interested in the field of research, but focus is given to final year undergraduate students and postgraduate students. As part of the course, programs and events will be organized at SNRI twice a semester on different fields of research. There will also be practical sessions through working on research papers. The course will focus in the fields of religion, ecology, philosophy, culture, feminism, human relations, peace studies, applied ethics, anthropology, sociology, and other fields. The course aims at providing a forum for the participants that are interested in seeking knowledge, thus enabling them to build self-confidence. The participants will develop skills to comprehend core concepts of the respective subject matter. The course also aims at promoting critical thinking and instilling in the participants a search for truth at an early age. More information on IMPRIMIS, along with the registration for the course, will be available on the website of SNRI. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Satyabalan. Today, we will be enlightened on two themes pertaining to the quest for dignity. The first presentation will be Space and Symbols Towards Dignity of the Oppressed, presented by Dr. Hugo Gorringe. I now invite Stalin, our research scholar, to introduce Dr. Hugo Gorringe to the audience.
Good evening, everyone. Hugo Gorringe is a senior lecturer in sociology and co-director of the Center for South Asian Studies at the University of Edinburgh. His research focuses on the interplay between caste, politics, and Dalit movements in Tamil Nadu. He is author of Untouchable Citizens, Sage publication 2005. Also, Panthers in Parliament, Dalits, Caste, and Political Power in South India, as well as numerous articles on chapters on identity, violence, space, caste, and politics. Having grown up in Tamil Nadu, He has a long-standing interest in Tamil cinema too. A short note about the Center for South Asian Studies, to which he is the co-director. Founded in 1988, Center for South Asian Studies is a central academic unit at the University of Edinburgh, and indeed for much of Scotland, dedicated to the study of South Asia. The center brings together a group of highly reputable academic colleagues from across anthropology, the College of Art, Engineering, Geography, History, Languages and Cultures, Law, Politics and International Relations, Religious Studies, Sociology, and the Vet School from within the university to provide a vibrant core academics that have a keen interest and expertise on South Asia. They also have a number of honorary fellows and associated staff that are linked with their center from across Scotland and Northern Britain. The center has also established a reputation and ranks as one of the 4 leading centers for South Asian studies in the UK and Europe more broadly. Thank you. Over to the coordinator.
Thank you, Stalin. And welcome, Dr. Hugo Gorringe.
Hello, and thanks so much for organizing this event and for putting it on, for the kind words of introduction, and a special thank you to Robin Seelan and to Yesu Anthony for negotiating with me and for postponing this when things didn't work out earlier in the year. Very happy to be here. As usual with academics, it's quite possible that I'll speak too long, so please do indicate when I'm running out of time. Okay, so my work is, as has been mentioned by Stalin, on Dalit mobilization, Dalit politics, and the impact of such mobilization. But I've touched on many different aspects, and in this talk, what I want to focus on is the interplay between space, symbolism, caste, and the concept of dignity, which I don't go into in too much detail, but which we return to towards the end. And what I want to suggest in this talk is that the dignity of the oppressed is not just about material development. It also requires cultural, symbolic, and spatial change too. And in the talk, I also want to engage with the debate around identity politics and the question of whether the sorts of things we can see on the slide here, the murals, the slides, the posters, make any difference whatsoever. And the starting point for me came when I was in Melur bus stand, so in Tamil Nadu, and I was with a friend of mine, and this auto went by with a massive, it was painted in the colors of the VCK, Tirumavalavan's party. And I said, wow, look at that. That would never have happened when I started my research in the 90s. And he sort of raised an eyebrow at me and he said, that, that's just identity politics. There's lots of that about giving names like this, changing names and so on. It's just about identity. There's much less action to redress issues. Tamal Muvithu here captures a prevalent critique of identity politics. We heard it echoed during the European Football Championships by Priti Patel, the Home Office Minister in the UK, who talked about the players taking the knee, black players trying to redress racism, as, quotes, gesture politics. There's this sense that identity or gesture politics is just a facade. It's a show which doesn't actually change anything meaningful. More academically, the idea of identity politics is of politics based on who you are, based on group identity rather than your beliefs, what you stand for. So it's who you are, not what you believe in. But to focus simply on those who do identity politics misses out why they might engage in it. And here we need to bring in analysis of the state and of more powerful actors. Craig Calhoun, in his work on new social movements, highlights how states are organized in particular ways that recognize some identities and freeze out others. You may be described in a certain way by the state. So scheduled caste, for example, which gives you a categorical identity, or you may feel left out by the state, as the gay liberation movement felt that they were in the 60s and 70s, and lobby for inclusion and recognition. In this sense, identity politics is not just about those on the ground creating posters and billboards and photograph albums. It is also about state processes of categorization. The other issue that we cannot ignore when we're looking at caste-based stratification is the issue of space. The focus on space is inescapable here because caste may be a notional construct, as Ambedkar argues, but it has material substance. It is etched into the fabric of society. And on the side of the slide here, you see the argument, residential plots for sale, Brahmins only, tenants rejected on the basis of caste, and village settings where castes are divided into streets and are allowed to use some spaces and not others. All ideologies and social formations, Henri Lefebvre, the French sociologist, argues, inscribe themselves, create themselves, and reproduce themselves in space. And we see that in the caste context. So the spatial ordering of caste matters. Tirumar Velavan, in his maiden speech in the Lok Sabha as an MP in 2009, made this point very clearly. It's a national shame, he argued, there are 2 villages in every area, by which he meant the Ura, the village proper, and the Dalit Cheri, 2 habitations in every village. Without eradicating this division, we cannot develop democracy. Caste, therefore, is built upon processes that create exclusion and segregation. Now, this is changing, and there are various studies pointing to processes of caste change, but the basic line dividing so-called untouchables or Dalits or scheduled castes from others remains intact in many parts of the country. Space, as Chairez Gaza, writing about Ambedkar, puts it, is not just a receptacle of caste relations, but a crucial factor in its production. So we need to, when we're understanding the dignity, the position of the oppressed, we need to place them within their social location. And this is really important because exclusion and segregation are not just a matter of physical isolation. It's not just that you live somewhere different or that you're placed in a particular position in the village. They have social consequences. Our identity, Charles Taylor, one of the foremost theorists of identity, puts it, is shaped by recognition or its absence. A lack of recognition, a lack of acceptance and inclusion can have serious consequences for people's sense of self, for people's sense of who they are and where they stand. Gopal Guru's work on humiliation highlights how this plays out in a caste context. It highlights the ways in which everyday exclusions being picked out or picked upon can create a sense of inferiority. Non-recognition in this sense, or misrecognition, can inflict harm, can in itself be a form of oppression. We can push this idea a little bit further by looking at Hoff and Pandy's experimental work on caste. And what Hoff and Pandy do is they get different groups of people into sort of lab type conditions, and they run simple tests with them. And what Hoff and Pandy found was that the performance of Dalit boys in simple maze-solving tasks fell below others, deteriorating by 23%, only when their caste was publicly announced. When there was no mention of caste, when everybody was in the room together and they were all doing the test with no preamble, everybody performed pretty similarly. But when you point to people and say, these guys are scheduled caste, then their performance fell. And think about what happens when Dalit students go to a university and in the first couple of days are told, those in receipt of government funding or scholarships stand up, and they're identified in much the same way as the experimental studies identify people. You see that humiliation is one of the building blocks of caste in this setting. In a different and analogous setting, Frantz Fanon talked about people being injected with inferiority complexes. And you can see a similar process playing out here. Humiliation is central to both the creation of caste and race. And this is where identity politics comes in. This is where groups like the VCK, but also the BSP and others are trying to change the look and feel of the spaces within which we live and work. When Dalit movements raise their flags above the entrance to an urban housing block, as Kartike and I wrote in another context, they're raising fundamental questions about the nature of public space and social interaction. They are staking a claim to social acceptance and recognition. In creating these symbols, these gestures, as Priti Patel would call them, Dalits are entering the public sphere. They are seeking to redress spatial marginality, and they are seeking to change the feel of the environment. And this is why so many Dalit politicians make the fundamental point that the images of Ambedkar, but of other more local heroes like Murugesan from the Melawalavu Panchayat, the reason why people point to these as significant is that they are not erected by the state. They are not imposed in the way that most statues are upon the public. They are bottom up, installed by people who felt a lack of recognition. They are meeting that fundamental need that Taylor talks about for spatial visibility and recognition. In other words, identity politics matters, and it matters because it gives people a sense of belonging. In the context of Uttar Pradesh, Nicolas Jaoul argues that the inaugurations of statues, such as the statues of Ambedkar or creation of boards, are important because they create a daring assertion and colonization of public space. They make the space properly public rather than a casted and an exclusionary space. They challenge the notion of caste space. They mark out territory and create a space of belonging and community inclusion, as opposed to a space of capital or a space of the state. They are, in the words of Nirmal Pua, space invasions, incursions into space that is ordinarily the preserve of the dominant. And at this level, symbolic politics can create agenda change. It can change the focus of everyday politics and conversations, because actually, most of the time, such issues are invisible. Invisibility or marginalization, Alison Brisk puts it, is the first barrier to change. In inserting yourself into public space, you are rejecting the invisibility that is enforced upon you. So, what's the problem? Why do people get hot under the collar about identity politics? Why do you have people like Priti Patel dismissing it as gesture politics? In a far-reaching editorial in Economic and Political Weekly, the EPW argued that the history of BSP politics, its creation of statues, the sorts of things you can see on the slide there, show how much Dalit icons in the fight for social justice and equality demolish the myth of caste superiority. They go on, however, to argue that the primacy given to symbolism while utterly neglecting the real tasks of bringing about progressive and social economic change can only imply a commitment to the status quo. So they say, basically, the BSP is creating icons and not changing anything on the ground. In Tamil Nadu, an analogous critique was made when the VCK decided to launch a television channel and collected lots of money to this end. An advocate in Perikulam told me, I don't understand why they don't invest in education. TV, fine, but we need to educate people. We should be investing the money in, quotes, real issues. So the argument is that identity politics is just changing the look of a place, not the underlying structures. But can we so easily disentangle recognition from redistribution? If people remain invisible, then they can be ignored. They don't have to be addressed. They do not need to be brought into the agenda. In the top right-hand side of the screen, there's a picture of a flagpole of one of the Dalit parties in Tamil Nadu, which was erected in the main village alongside those of the DMK, the ADMK, and so on. Because it was a threat, because it posed a challenge to the caste order, it was dug up and chucked into a nearby pond. And what this reaction shows us is the extent to which symbolic politics challenges everyday status quo. Nicolas Jaoul echoes the EPW in saying, actually, statues are great, but the question remains as to how long a movement that emphasizes the dignity of the oppressed can escape material questions. Jaoul here, I think, falls into the trap of equating dignity with material development and advancement. And I want to push back against that. Nancy Fraser, who is a leading writer on the politics of recognition, initially said, we need to move from recognition to redistribution, because unless you change the structural order, then nothing changes. But she later changed her mind, and she added that recognition and redistribution have to go hand in hand. They interact causally. Without recognition, you cannot have redistribution. Dalit mobilization highlights systematic marginalization, highlights systemic invisibilization of caste, and therefore allows it to be addressed. The leading theorist of new social movements, Alberto Malucci, writes a book called Challenging Codes. And he argues that what social movements do is challenge the codes on which society operates, challenges how we live our lives, and questions why we do what we do, and offers alternatives. What we see in the erection of Ambedkar statues like the one in Perikulam, which was erected by local people, is not just a sense of changed space, but a sense of pride, of collectivity, and of belonging. Muttulakshmi, who I interviewed in Perikulam, noted that the statue here wasn't erected by the government. There was a collection from the people. Whether people put in 1 rupee or whatever, it was that tax collection from people that enabled us to meet the government insistence that we have a bronze statue. What happened is they erected a concrete statue overnight. This was demolished by the government because it hadn't been put up with permission. And then there were mass riots by people objecting to the removal of the Ambedkar statue. So the government said, okay, you can have an Ambedkar statue, but only if it's in bronze. The assumption was the poor Dalits of Perioculum would not be able to afford this. But they went door to door, they campaigned, and they raised the money and erected that magnificent statue that you see on the top right there. Our leader came, Dhirma Vallabhan, that is. Dhirma was in alliance with Mupana at the time. This was in 99. So masses of people from districts across Tamil Nadu came to see the unveiling of the statue. Hotels were told to shut because they thought there was going to be trouble. And so local people decided to feed all those who were coming. So there's this real sense of community mobilization. It was, as Maxine Loynd points out, an empowering process. It gave people a sense of the possibility, of the ability to change the world around them. And it created a sense of alternative possibilities. In the bottom right, there's a picture of Kandan from Vanjinagram near Melur. This was a guy in the 1980s who challenged local caste oppression and fought back against the blatant expressions of untouchability. He was set upon by a mob of devas and beaten to death. But Dalits in the village have created this memorial to him, and they refer to him as a Kulusami, a local deity. They also speak of him as the justice man. And speaking to people in Vanjinagram, what you get a sense of is the possibility that things can be different, that we don't have to just go along with things, that everything can change. So where does this leave us? And I'm bringing things to a close now so we have time for more questions and discussion. Hegemonic power, or the ideologies of the dominant in Lefebvre's terms, create the reality in which we live. We look around and we think that the status quo is normal, but actually it is constructed. It is created in order to mark and reproduce particular ways of being in the world. So resisting that reality, Heckman argues, can only be done in the terms that the reality creates. If you do not insert yourself into public space, you are rendered invisible. If you do not create statues, then there are no markers of people like you in public space. Illiterate people, as Jacqueline, leader of the Avantamala Peravai, puts it, cannot write history, so history itself is a scam. Ravi Kumar, MP elsewhere, has written about the silences of history, and historians themselves point to the ways in which subaltern voices are systematically written out of historical accounts. Symbolic politics, in this sense, is real because it inserts the views and images, the representations of the suppressed and oppressed castes into the spaces that everybody enters. It serves to democratize space. It serves to alter the agenda, and it has material effects. Crucially, for our seminar, it has psychosocial effects as well. I vividly remember doing interviews in Mela Vallabhu in 1999. This was 2 years after the massacre of Mela Vallabhu Murugesan and 6 of his followers. In 99, Dalits there were scared of speaking to me. While I was sitting there trying to create conversation, they go, they already know you're here. You shouldn't really be here. We shouldn't be talking. When I returned in 2010, the situation was radically different. People walked around openly. They took me to show, they walked me through the village to show me key sites of importance to them. They discussed continuing issues and they noted what they were doing about it. They'd recently elected an autonomous Dalit woman to represent them from the Panchayat. Symbolic change is not just about gestures. It has knock-on implications for self-esteem, for empowerment, and for dignity. The dignity of the oppressed, I suggest, is inseparable from symbolic and spatial changes to the caste order. Durkheim argues that, okay, that's true, but you cannot do this as your main agenda. I take his point, unless you also have education, unless you're also lobbying for material development, then you can have self-esteem and perpetual poverty. But actually, if we follow Nancy Fraser's more recent work, then we see that without this process of recognition, without the self-esteem and the ability to make demands that comes with it, then there's no redistribution in any case. Dignity depends on mobilization from below and on creating change that is reflected in public space. We see a classic example of this from SMP colony in Madurai, where the local temple has this image of Ambedkar. So I'll stop there and leave time for more questions.
Thank you, Dr. Hugo Gorringe, for those inspirational and thought-provoking ideas. It was a very practical presentation with plenty of images as well as things relevant to the culture. The floor is now open for any questions or clarifications. We shall have roughly around 15 minutes for this, so feel free to ask your questions.
Lindsay.
Yes, go on, Fad.
Yeah. Thank you, Professor Hugo. I'm Lawrence Fernandez, a professor here and a research guide. I like the topic you spoke about because we study about it in our classes, identity politics, but with a difference. Difference is this. I don't know whether you read about Amartya Sen, who wrote about identity politics in his book, Single Identity, speaks about. In your presentation, you spoke of identity that affirms and confirms, and it is a positive aspect. But Amartya Sen brings about identity, looking at single identity that damages the society. Therefore, I'm glad I got two perspectives on this idea of identity. But sometimes the single identity can be very damaging. So your view, I thank you for your presentation. It's very positive, optimistic, but this also in my mind is there, which I want to place before you. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Father Lawrence. That's an excellent point. It's a really important point, and it's something I have written about, critiques of identity politics. It can end up as a form of essentialism, where you go to ever smaller and smaller identities. So instead of having a Dalit identity, you have subcaste identities, each of whom is fighting against the other. You can also have more overarching identities, such as that projected by Hindutva, which tries to subsume everybody and doesn't give everybody a voice. What we're talking about with identity politics here, however, is the mobilization of the oppressed on the basis that society, on the category that society has given to them. So until you have the category of scheduled caste, then there's no basis on which to mobilize. Until you have the category of Dalit, you cannot fight against that. And so identity politics on behalf of the subordinate is the only means by which you can challenge the dominant order, the only means by which you can change the status quo and raise questions about why things are the way they are. There is a danger, and Arundhatias in Tamil Nadu will point to Pavia politics and say they are excluding us. And that's a danger that we need to be alert to and awake to. But actually, you need to get the issue on the agenda first, and that is one thing that identity politics can do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Could you go ahead?
Joshua.
Shall I intervene? Welcome, Hugo.
Lindsay?
Again,
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. A quick question. I really like the way you brought about, how, contrasting your thought from Nicholas Joule, who's another friend of ours who's done a great work, exemplary work. But you clearly make a very important connection using Nancy Fraser, you know, how we need to have recognition as well as redistribution. As of now, some of our own, anti-caste brothers and sisters, we just hold on to identity, don't talk about land and other resources happens. Or our dear Marxist friends, especially from the academy, Western academy, talk about, class aspect, racial capitalism, and they would not like to talk about, Brahminical capitalism, and, they would not like to talk about how the cultural identity questions are important. So I think this delinking the two is a massive problem. I'm glad you're bringing that out. But I wanted to know your thoughts on very crucial thing that I'm beginning to work on. Literally, but as you know, my work is on identities, and I literally want to, this will go on. I'm just saying, polemically, that I want to stop my work on anti-caste organic intellectuals. Instead, I want to talk about Brahmanism. So interrogating the mainstream identity, I think we are missing out. You in your answer for the last question, you said the dominant identity. That's, I think, is a nice entry. But we don't have a book on Brahmanism. We don't have a book on casteism, irrespective of the disciplines we come from, right? We have not interrogated the 5%, the Brahmins, who are across. That's why I'm beginning a project called Globalization of Caste, interconnecting US, Europe, and India, and the Caribbean, where I've done in the Caribbean, I've just published a piece on understanding Brahminism in the Caribbean, did fieldwork in Suriname and Guyana and so on. So virulent Brahminism is thriving and interconnecting the globe. So if you don't interrogate that, who is going to recognize us? Suppose imagining you as a Dalit Hugo, you go on, breastfeeding, look, I am casteless, I am a local Tamil, I am a Puriviha Kudi and all that. Those guys don't care, right? So because we are not, so that way, I think interrogating the Brahminical mainstream, who is authorizing the identity, who is peripheralizing is extremely important for many of us who are sympathetic to the marginalized and the emancipation. Your thoughts, please. Thanks.
Thanks so much for that. Nice to see you again, and really thoughtful, thought-provoking comments as ever. You'll be pleased to know, actually, one of my PhD students who's in the call is studying Brahmins, who is turning the gaze onto Brahmin identities. And you're absolutely right. I mean, castelessness, the ability to not see caste, is a position of privilege. And we absolutely need to do work on that. But actually, one of the reasons why we're talking about that now is that we have had this uprising from Dalits who are saying, well, hang on a minute, we're not living in a casteless society. We are still being systematically excluded. Where are the images of other Dalits? Where are the images of our icons, of our heroes? And once you start inserting them into the body politic, then we're better placed to turn our gaze around and say, hang on a minute, what are you doing? And Balagopal, writing in Andhra Pradesh, has this wonderful piece on hidden reservations. When everybody gets hot under the collar and says, these quota students are taking all the money, how reservations are the death of memory. He says, well, hang on a minute. Those who don't have reservations do not need them because they already have the hidden reservations of property, of privilege, a culture of learning, education, all these sorts of things. So you are absolutely right. In order to dismantle caste, we need to study up. But so what I'm doing here is trying to understand how those at the bottom arrive at a position where they can challenge caste and gain a sense of empowerment and dignity. But great point. And as I say, one of my PhD students is carrying on that project.
Thank you, Hugo. I appreciate it. Yeah.
Okay, we have Kunal Dugal and Maria de la Salle. Kunal, if you can ask the question, please.
Hi, Hugo. Thanks for the presentation. I also want to ask that what about the question of iconoclasm? That because the symbolic assertion from Dalits also in the public sphere especially also doesn't go unchallenged by the upper caste, and then the politics of desecration takes place, and then So this also becomes a whole battlefield of, facing the pushback from the dominant upper caste, like destroying your symbols, and then in, retaliation, you again raise and erect your symbol of assertion. So I would like to know more about that. Like, it somehow felt that, Dalits are just presenting the symbols of dignity, but actually it's not just a very neutral, equal public sphere. It's also a public sphere which is constantly attacked by the upper caste.
Absolutely, really, yes, very important point. And actually, I arrived at the study of symbols through the politics of desecration, through the desecration of Ambedkar statues in Tamil Nadu. And that's a vitally important part of the process. Firstly, the desecration of Dalit symbols reveals the continuing operation of caste that hitherto has been rendered invisible. So we have talk of caste as a harmonious order, where everybody knows their place and everybody lives happily alongside each other. That only happens when you do not challenge it. So in challenging the status quo, Dalits reveal the continued grip on power that dominant castes have. So they challenge that, they push it forward, and then they open up possibilities for conversation. In the short term, that may lead to more violence. It may result in, as it did in Mela Vallava, in deaths, in conflict, and in confrontation. But if you're dismantling a structure of inequality, then you are bound to get into confrontation. The hope is that actually in the steady drip feed of images, you create this more gradual change towards a society that looks and feels different, that is more inclusive, that is more tolerant of different identities, that is more open to the icons, ideas, and claims of others. But changing society is never easy, it's never non-confrontational. There is an argument that the creation of equal citizenship overnight in 1947 was what is termed a passive revolution. Because it occurred overnight, because it was a gift, it wasn't seized from the dominant, the underlying structures of unequal land holdings remained intact. So what we have now with Dalit assertion is an attempt to realize the promises of the Constitution through extra institutional means. And yes, it is going to lead to conflict, but that conflict actually challenges the myth that we live in a casteless society and highlights the distance left to travel.
Hugo, thanks for your presentation. And I need a clarification on one point you made. You quoted about Fraser, where he suggests for moving from recognition to redistribution. And I am not able to understand what this redistribution actually means. I'm asking this question from the point of view of the social stigma attached to section of people in the society. And Dr. Ambedkar also was insisting on social liberation and not on economic or political liberation. His point was on social liberation because of this attachment of social stigma. I understood this redistribution from the angle of the economy. Am I right, or you can just clarify?
Thanks, Maria. Yes, you are absolutely right. Redistribution refers to economic redistribution. And so you have, Gajendran earlier talked about the Marxists, the idea that to properly emancipate a group, you need to redistribute the wealth from the dominant, from the elites, to the subordinates. And so the argument is that identity politics may bring you recognition, it doesn't bring you material or economic advancement. there is no redistribution of resources to those in need. But what Nancy Fraser argues is that if there is no recognition, then there's no redistribution anyway, nothing. So if you think about one of the few forms of redistribution in India today, it is the system of reservations. And reservations are channeled through recognition of castes that have faced historical disadvantage, that are in need of a hand up. And so redistribution in that sense follows the recognition of disadvantage. And so what I would argue is that mobilization for recognition is important for two reasons. Firstly, it raises the issue which can then be addressed. But secondly, it empowers and gives those mobilizing a sense of self-esteem such that they can demand further change. Nothing comes to you without protest. All the gains we've made in democracies around the world have been on the basis of protest by excluded and marginalized groups. So Dalit assertion puts their issues onto the agenda and creates the capacity to demand further changes. So it's in that sense that I think recognition and redistribution are tied together. Does that answer your question?
I can partly agree on your interpretation of seeing the reservation as a kind of redistribution, but still I am not able to accept the point of Fraser from distribution, and I doubt how far it will help the eradication of our system and how it will help the Dalit people. Because the point is on recognition, the social stigma. However, there is an economic upliftment, still they are considered as something very, very low. I'm not still able to accept the point of Fraser.
But the two go hand in hand. So what she points out is that recognition and redistribution are tied together. So your point is an important one. So at the moment, with social stigma, you can have, in fact, we do have, the president of India is a Dalit, but he cannot escape the humiliation of the prefix. He is always a Dalit president. He is never the president. So, there you have economic well-being, but you still have humiliation. So you need recognition as well. You need acceptance as well. So the politics of recognition seeks to invert and combat stigma, but equally, social emancipation without economic redistribution can mean that you are free, but free and impoverished. So you also need to address the structural pillars of caste. Caste at heart is about opportunity hoarding. It's about the hoarding of resources, and that the unequal basis of society needs to be equalized if we are to have a fair and equal society. So you both need to go hand in hand. But you're right, economics alone cannot address caste. This is why you need the two of them.
Okay, we have time for one last question, I guess. And Daneshwar, if you can proceed with your question.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Hugo. Very nice presentation. The argument is very nice way articulated for like how that the symbol as worked as a dignity for the oppressed. But my question is that like this symbol discourse where in UP the symbolical structure and the mobilization of the Dalit or mobilization of law, how it works in UP in comparison to Tamil Nadu. I don't know, as a larger perspective, what are the pathway of mobilization between that symbol and dignity? I hope you got my question.
Yes, thanks, Daneshwar. So I think that's an important point. I mean, one of the key differences between UP and TN is that in UP you had the state government engaged in the politics of recognition. The state government were funding statues and so on and so forth. And there the critique that they could have spent more on education, they could have done other things, has somewhat more purchase, it has somewhat more credibility. In Tamil Nadu, we're talking about tiny parties that have had at most 4 MLAs, have had at most 2 MPs. They are not in a position to do more. So they're changing the look and feel of the local environment gives people a sense of, I am represented, I am recognized. There's somebody like me whose image is on the walls, and so I feel a sense of belonging to this place. So I think that is critical. The more power you have, the more you can achieve. But that said, none of us, Jacque, when I was interviewing him, pointed to, I was in the temple city of Madurai. He pointed to Meenakshi Amman temple and he said, people come here from around the world to view this. How many millions were spent on it? How many people died in its construction? And how many of us complain about that now? So when we look back in 50 years at the BSP statue building program, are we going to say, what a waste of money? Or are we going to say, that this was a way of redressing cultural inequalities? And Maxine Loynd has spent time interviewing people in the parks in Uttar Pradesh. And she says ordinary Dalits who struggle to pay for food on a daily basis still feel a sense of dignity, of empowerment, of self-esteem when they visit these places. So yes, I think the government in UP did other things as well. But as Jacqueline said, this cannot be your only program. You need to do more, but actually the changing the symbolic structure of space is materially significant as well.
Yeah, you are right. It is similarly in Madhya Pradesh, the birthplace of Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar Mau. On his birthday, many people coming to visit his place across the country. So that is also symbolically united them.
Absolutely.
Positively. Yeah. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay, we do have another 10 minutes. So feel free to put forth your questions.
Or we can hear from Yesu Anthony and then have a round of questions addressed to both of us at the end, maybe.
Okay, so if there are no questions at the moment, we shall proceed to the second presentation, and then towards the end, probably we can have questions addressed to both. Okay, so today's second presentation will be on the theme Dreams and Utopia, Dalit Constructions for Dignity by research scholar Yesu Anthony. I now invite Stalin to introduce Yesu Anthony to the gathering. Stalin.
Yes. Yesu Anthony, a research scholar of Loynd Research Institute, is a Catholic priest of the Diocese of Chengalpat. His research title is A Study of the Historical and Philosophical Foundation of Dalit Power in the Writings of Ayodhya Das. Yesu Anthony is a very talented, multi-talented person who is known for his writing, is good with public speaking, conducting orientation programs for the teachers and students and even family members, counseling and teaching, and writing poems in Tamil language. And to his credit, he had already written 8 Tamil books, mostly religious-oriented books, before he joined for his research work in Loynd Research Institute. And after joining Loynd, he has written 2 articles, Deconstructing and Reconstructing Socio-Cultural Categories of Honor and Shame, an inquiry from the perspective of Ayodhya Das. Second one, The Philosophical Construction of Dalit Body with a special reference to Nandanar the Rebel. Thank you.
Thank you, Stalin, and welcome, Yesu Anthony.
Yeah. Yeah. So, dear friends, at the outset, I would like to extend my gratitude to Dr. Robin Seelan for giving me this opportunity to present this paper. And also, I'm extremely happy and honored to share this Zoom stage with Professor Hugo Gorringe, an eminent sociologist and a Dalit writer and thinker whom I first met a decade ago at Edinburgh. Thank you. So that I have taken for discussion today is dreams and utopia, construction for a dignity. Throughout the world has witnessed number of utopian constructions with a distinct socio-historical context as this politics. Any marginalized communities fight against hegemony and dominance includes dreams and utopias. There are dominant utopias as well as subaltern utopian construction. This article investigates the salient features of construction of Dalits, the marginalized of Indian nation. Here, I have chosen in this thinkers who have dreamt about having a utopia for Dalits. Phule, Haitidas Panditer, and Dr. Ambedkar. Dalit utopias are a clear sign of their quest for dignity and demand for humane treatment. And Dalit utopias are the roadmaps the collective for an ideal society in which they can live in dignity, be free, and have a fair place in the society alongside everyone else. So therefore, this article presentation, I would like to examine the meaning and definition of utopia, as well as the nature of Dalit utopia, various characteristics of Dalit utopia, and constituent dimension of Dalit utopia as homesickness for dignity, as well as presenting it as an ideology and as a method that provides theoretical necessity for systemic reforms. Moreover, the salient elements of Dalit utopias as well as the philosophy of their quest for dignity are discussed. And finally, the presentation attempts to establish that Dalit utopia is a clear evidence of their desire for dignity and a decent treatment. Let us try to grasp the meaning and understanding of the concept utopia. In the first part, I shall try to present the definition and meaning of Dalit utopia briefly. There are different concepts that we use here in this presentation: dreams, dystopia, utopia. So just I would like to give the meaning of it. Dreams, not those series of thoughts, images, or sensations that we get during sleep, but rather the dream, it has its etymological root in oneiro, a Greek word. It gives a meaning to contemplate the possibility of doing something, or that something might be the case, or to consider as possibility. Hence, dream is a strongly desired goal or purpose, something that fully satisfies a wish. Dystopia is an imagined place or a state in which everything is unpleasant or bad. It denotes an imagined state or society. Utopia, the word utopia is derived from the Greek word meaning not. Literally, it means no place, existing place. And there are different meanings or interpretation about utopia. Various thinkers have contributed towards it. For example, I would like to summarize. It is an imagined ideal world. It's an imagined ideal world. Or it could be defined as a desired possible world. Holiday, he defines, it is an imagined or hypothetical place, system, or a state existence in which everything is perfect, especially in respect of a social structure, laws, and points utopia as a well-planned imaginary human well-being. So these are different explanations for the word utopia derived that utopia is not a blueprint, but a quest for dignity. The utopian construction doesn't give the blueprint for the casteless and they desire, they dream, they imagine, they speculate. For the utopian construction does not include a blueprint for a casteless and democratic society. Rather, it is a society that they wish for and dream about, envision and speculate. This Dalit utopia could also be a political category in as much as it rejects the present enslaving social realities along with its enslaving ideologies and dares to dream a sorrowless state of life, which is just opposed to their rightful place in the public domain. The functional dimensions of it, a few points that I'd like to summarize here. It opens our minds to new possibilities in utopia, clarifies our social and political values, highlights gap analysis, provides hope for a better society. Utopias give us a necessity directions that we need to move. It functions as an educational science, and it orients towards a social change, and it reinforcements for the work for utopias. So there are several utopian constructions throughout the history. We come across several utopian constructions by different groups of different people and different thinkers in different contexts. But first of all, the word used by Tam and the Dalit utopia. How do we derive the meaning of Dalit utopia? A kind of working definition I'm trying to arrive at. Based on the above meaning of utopia, it is possible to infer that Dalit utopia is simply a state of life imagined or desired, and it is an attempt by Dalits in this subcontinent to create a perfect society, namely a casteless social order. On the whole, Dalit utopia could be characterized as an innate homesickness. There is a homesick-rooted consciousness as the victims of caste as or treated with the dignity and recognized as a co-human with others in the social order to the present flawed that is the sources of dignity and honor. As Arjun Dangle he states, Dalit utopia it represents the hopes and ambitions of a new society and a new people. Therefore, when we analyze this, a restlessness for the inhuman treatment and resistance towards a social order and reconstruction of a dignified life and a humanizing society. Therefore, Dalit utopia, a new society imagined, and a new context envisioned. For this discussion, I would like to summarize briefly contributed by way of their contribution towards this Dalit utopias. For example, Saint Pandita and Dr. Ambedkar. First of all, let us take saintly man from a Bhakti movement and who lived in the late 15th and early 16th century. He exposed the hypocrisy, the utopian construction of Ravidas. He he dreamt of a society called a Queen City, a Behumbara. He called it a Behumbara. In a nutshell, what he was trying to communicate in this, it conceives a sorrowless society where there is no hierarchy, where all are treated equally, where all could exercise freedom as a free being without any trace of external control, where all would enjoy free access to public spaces without any hurdles, and proposes a commonwealth state where there is no possibility of having private property. And above all, he dreamt a society where there is no caste hierarchy and inhuman gradation of human beings and their dignity. And Ravidas extends an invitation to all to walk beside him towards this sorrowless city called Behumbara. So, according to him, it is a sorrowless city, and he calls it as a Behumbara. And next, Jyotirao Phule, he spoke about kingdom of Balistan. Phule, he is called as a father of Indian social reformation. Uh, he was vehemently against Brahminical hegemony, and he laid the foundations for envisioning a utopia of independent India, one that looked to the remembrance and recreation in modern form of a kingdom of Bali. He was trying to establish a kingdom called Balistan, like Hindustan. He wanted to have a Balistan after the heart of the great king Bali. Bali thus became for him a symbol of human achievement. His Balistan's main goal was, once again, a sorrowless social order in which all troubles and sorrows will vanish. He is mentioning about the prayers that are offered during the Dasara festival. And they pray like this: they let all troubles and misery go, and the kingdom of Bali come. And that is a custom of praying like this. So therefore, he emphasized how the non-Brahmins have been reviving their dreams of Bali Raj every year, saying this prayer on a Dasara day. Next, we have Ayatidasa Pandita, another great reformer, revolutionist from Tamil Nadu, and he is called as a father of South Indian social reformation. And Ayatidasa Pandita, a greatest social reformer, attempted to question the framework of caste system with a Buddhist rationalist frame, specifically a Tamil Buddhist frame, through his Tamil Buddhist revival movement after Buddha. He was dreaming a casteless social order. Casteless society was his ideal world, and his readings of ancient Tamil history enabled to spread ideas of socialism, rationality, and modernity in colonial India. He was also referring to a period when society was essentially casteless and democratic, and it was founded on the principles of ethical purity, mutuality, and compassion. According to Ayatidas, the ancient casteless Dravidians, from little one to the elders, have been adhering to the Dharma of Buddha and peacefully celebrating community living and following the values of practical wisdom, sharing, and social harmony with the Buddhi, Igai, and Sanmargam. And he was speaking about this casteless society. Next, I've taken Ambedkar. Ambedkar spoke about Samay Sangha Nirmana. Ambedkar was constantly spoke about his ideal utopian social order. He elaborated his idea about an ideal society as follows. He said, "My ideal would be a society based on liberty, equality, and fraternity. An ideal society should be mobile, should be full of channels for conveying a change taking place in one part to other parts. In an ideal society, there should be many interests consciously communicated and shared." According to Gail Ahmed, it is based on liberty, equality, and fraternity founded in the ancient Indian tradition of Buddhism. So therefore, his utopia is essentially an attitude of respect and reverence towards a fellow human being. As a result, Ambedkar aspired to create a new ideal world, which he addressed as an enlightened India, Prabuddha Bharat. Unless the Hindu social order was reordered, he compares such an effort to the act of building a palace on a dung heap. And now I would like to reflect on the philosophical aspects of the concept dignity. Uh, First of all, dignity, an ontological vocation for egalitarianism. Man's search for dignity is driving force that guides the course of any subaltern history. The aim of Dalit Utopia is to reclaim their primary good, namely the right to a dignified life. It is basically an ontological vocation to live a dignified life and acknowledge dignity in others. The aim of Dalit Utopia is an uncompromised claim for dignity, and dignity originates. The very meaning is contains the notion of distinction, special merit, or worthiness. So the worthiness of every human being is very, very important, and that is the source of human right. Every human beings they are worthy. So denial of dignity is denial of humanity. No equivalent for dignity. Immanuel Kant speaks about this. All, according to Immanuel Kant, has either price or dignity and dignity. And dignity for him was above all prices, and had no equivalent. He was emphatically arguing that dignity could not be compensated or made equivalent in any way. So therefore, everything has either price or dignity. If it has a price, something else can be put in its place as equivalent. So if it is exalted above all praise and so admits of no equivalent, then it has a dignity. So it is beyond all praise and valuation. Dignity is an inherent quality, nothing to do with the social ranking. Bernard Boxall views dignity as a inherent, stating that in virtue of their humanity and not in virtue of their social rank. So dignity has nothing to do with ascribed qualities like caste or any social ranking. And this dignity is universal and inalienable. So moral egalitarianism of persons, which is inherent, universal, and inalienable. Um, Dignity is neither optional nor sorry. Yeah. Dignity is neither optional nor relative. Pope Benedict XVI he says a stable, not relative, not optional foundation, which means it is obligatory and absolute foundation of all other rights. Linda emphasizes yet another element of dignity by claiming that dignity is autonomous, inherent, foundational principle which doesn't require any external recognition but serves as the basis of all other rights. Next, saudade, a Portuguese word said to capture the homesickness and longing of separation from the homeland. So that's the word, homesickness for dignity. Dalit utopian construction is a response of the Dalit community's quest for life, quest for dignity, and quest for acceptance and inclusion, and quest for active inclusion. This pursuit is at the heart of Dalit utopias. And these quests are innate in the depth of Dalit consciousness, welling up from the awareness of victimization of Dalits. However, these quests are not only personal but collective in nature and beneficial to the society as well. In other words, the transgenerational cumulative Dalit self suffers from the pain of homesicknesses for a dignified treatment and to acclaim mutual co-equal selves. Dalit Utopia is in fact an epitome of this intolerable longingness for dignified life. And it is a new wine in a new wineskin. As an oppressed community, Dalit desires a new wine, and that too in a new wineskin, which means entire system has to be changed. The newness of wine and the wineskin is predominantly crucial component in the utopias of Dalits. Dalit utopias contemplates totally a new world, an ideal world. There is no trace of old enslaving elements to be found. Popper, a British philosopher, opines that with a desire to build a world which is not only a little better and more rational than ours, but which is free from all its ugliness, not a crazy quilt, an old garment badly patched, but an entirely a new coat, a really beautiful new world, complete structural changes, he points out. Paulo Ferreira also speaks about his desire to live in a world that fights for equality. He states, my dream is the dream of having a society that is less ugly and less unjust, a society in which it would be easier to love and therefore easier to live, easier to dream, a decent society permanently striving to overcome discrimination and the negation of others. For example, a society that struggles for equality. So there is a homesickness, is the undercurrent that moves the Dalit utopia. And the third one, dissent, an autonomous act for dignity. I just borrow a concept from the author, the Zuboff, and he speaks about instrumentarianism. And this means where the marginalized behaviors are shaped towards others' needs. Dalit utopianism is an act to break this caste instrumentarianism, which turns marginalized into caste disciplinary body, a docile body, in the words of Hugo. Etymologically, this word resistance means to take a stand. So Dalit utopia is a dissent that takes a categorical stand against caste and domination and hegemony. Dalit utopia, an ideological resistance against caste. It is an assertion that opposes the ideological reservoir, namely the caste hegemony. Caste, as we have already heard, is a notion, Ambedkar says. So therefore, resistance against caste servitude and surveillance casteism is very important. Gordon states that to resist is to experience autonomy, to experience oneself as planning against one's opponent, and to interpret the situation as avoidable and controllable. So therefore, when analyzing Dalit utopian concept, it is obvious that it strikes the very root of caste system and its foundation. And also, it is an outright rejection of anything that is dominant and inhuman. Next, the salient features of Dalit utopian construction, a quest for dignity. What are the different salient features? There are 5 points, 6 points I have. The first one is Dalit sensibilities as the foundation of Dalit utopia. The Dalit utopian construction is conceived, contemplated, and built with caste sensibilities in mind. Cumulative quest for denied dignity, robbed existence, denied selfhood, social exclusion, and to have control over oneself are the core of Dalit utopia. Therefore, it is these sensibilities of Dalit oppressed consciousness made them to respond by way of constructing utopias. In a way, it's an ideological war dared against the dystopia of caste. Social order of the dominance to which Dalits have been made perpetual victim expresses their discontent with the prevailing society. And also, it is against the intimate enemy, as Nandi says. The Dalit utopianism engages in a dialogical process with an intimate enemy, as Nandi is concept. And he says the dominant caste psychological construction of Dalit submissive self and the internalization of the same is the real enemy that is challenged in the Dalit utopian construction, that is indoctrination or caste socialization or miseducation, the words of Noam Chomsky. So therefore, Dalit utopianism is essentially a dialogical praxis for solidarity. A praxis, according to Paulo Ferreira, is reflection and action upon the world in order to transform it. And again, Paulo Ferreira, he speaks about nutritionist vision of knowledge, where the enslaving epistemic feeding and notional imposition have been active in creating Dalits. So Dalitness is formed, Dalitness is given, it is constructed a thing. It is an epistemological habit. The caste epistemological habits are fed into the mind of the Dalits. And next one is this worldly. The Dalit utopian is this worldly and non-metaphysical. It is not a pie in the sky. Gustavo Gutierrez, he summarized the subaltern utopian's main component as presence of historical plan that uh, that dreams qualitatively a new society and aspires to establish a new social order. It completely desires a new historical project, a program for a new social order, new social relationship. So therefore, above all, according to him, it concerns of the present society and very much about not about the distant past. Both Ambedkar, Ayudas, and all the other thinkers constructed their utopia basing on, especially Ambedkar and Ayudas Pandita, on the Buddhist Dharma. Next one, the humanizing project of Dalit utopianism. The ulterior motive of Dalit utopias is to humanize the collective selves of the society. And it's also worth noting that humanizing is the unique project of Dalit utopian construction. As long as the Dalits are subject to inhumane treatment, the other, especially the agent of caste dominance, could be considered as unworthy of authentic dignity. Their superiority and the status they celebrate and enjoy are only a pseudo in nature, are not authentic. Dehumanizing others is an act of dehumanizing oneself. Rosemary Radford Ruther emphatically states that dehumanizing others is an act of dehumanizing oneself. If this is the case, then any attempt to humanize the oppressed is an authentic humanization of others. As a humanizing project, Dalit utopian construction must inevitably take upon itself the responsibility of humanizing the dominant caste who are consciously or unconsciously functions as the agents of oppression and who perpetuates it. The true object of a praxis, according to Paulo Ferrero, is the oppressed becoming the agent of a universal humanization. Next point. Okay. Utopia as a tool, Utopia as a tool provides a theoretical necessity. Dalit Utopia can also be viewed as a mechanism that inspires the marginalized to carry out the mission of establishing an egalitarian society. In general, Utopia is not intended to realize. It merely defines a state in which effort should be made. And Dalit utopian construction serves as a theoretical necessity for the oppressed community to make a frog leap towards a casteless social order. And therefore, it is a theoretical tool for a new social order. As Jameson explains, the utopian idea keeps alive the possibility of world qualitatively distinct from this one and takes the form of the stubborn negation of all that is. So therefore, it is a denial and an action against existential frustration, the concept used by Viktor Frankl. Discourses on Dalit utopia implant optimism, hope against despair in the minds of the oppressed. Even though it is distant reality, it gives meaning to their current existence. Again, Ombed writes that utopias are projected visions, sometimes imagined in the past, sometimes located in the different world, sometimes inscribed in the future possibility, but they all lay claim to some kind of reality, the reality of being possible, and in so doing, provide the motivation for efforts at social transformation. So the fifth point, an ideological critique that invalidates Indian casteist social ethos as meaningless. Dalit utopia is an ideological coup on the existing inhuman situation. Dalit utopias could be thought of as a mega categories that attempt to recoup the dignity of the system and organize a new one. Casteist social order is critiqued from the perspective of Dalits. From the perspective of the oppressed, social categories and structures are questioned Only if they deprived Dalits or treated with the dignity will the Indian subcontinent will be bestowed a meaningful dignity, or else it would be seen as a bogus and a pseudo dignity. So here, the other is constructed as a critique of dominant social order. The Dalit utopias categorically identifies the other or constructs the other. The other may be community or communities that is responsible for their marginalization, or the hegemonic systems and structures that perpetuates their marginalization. And furthermore, criticizing the current social order entails not just critiquing the unequal social order, but also critiquing the agents who perpetuate marginalization and who resuscitates the marginalization time and again. Conversion of social categories into a political categories. Dalit Utopia, in its quest for dignity, engages in the process of converting social categories into political category by critiquing the social categories. And it also functions as a criterion. Dalit Utopia function as a standard or criterion against which the current reality is evaluated and criticized. Thus, the utopia of the marginalized naturally critiques the existing social order and believes in the possibility of recreating a new world which engages. And finally, the Dalit Utopia demands structural changes. Intense desire for structural changes. Christopher Gutierrez affirms that utopian of the marginalized are fundamentally revolutionary because utopian for him is simply a matter of complete rejection which attempts to strike the root of evil. When the Dalit reclaims the rightful space through this utopian construction, it will almost certainly necessitate the reorganization of an asymmetrical social political relationship, which will have a significant effect on the dominant hegemony. So, in the words of Noam Chomsky, Dalit utopian construction, I borrow his word, is the product of Dalit's wounded consciousness, which is built against the pedagogy of lies, which prevents a critical comprehension of a reality. So, therefore, consequently, Dalit utopias can be considered as pedagogy of truth, which promotes a critical comprehension of a reality. Dalit utopias have been devoted to reorganizing the framework and institution that maintain and sustain the oppressive social order that ensures Dalit marginalization. It is observed that Dalit movements and caste movements challenged and sought to transform the basic structure of the Indian society. To conclude, Dalit utopian construction of the past have contributed and played a significant role in realizing a dignified life and changing the socio-political systems to the advantage of the marginalized. Both the transgenerational imposed submissive self of Dalits and the transgenerational collective dominant self of the dominant caste members must be transitioned to transgenerational collective co-equal self or natural self, where both can share the experience of sharing the ethos of the castelessness whose pillars are laid on liberty, equality, and fraternity. Utopianism is necessary for action leading to transformation. If utopianism is lost, Gail Orman says, if utopianism is lost, man would lose his will to shape history and his ability to understand it. So therefore, Dalit's efforts are aimed at leading a dignified life. So therefore, the quest for dignity is what creates utopia in the face of a dystopia. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Yesu Anthony, for enlightening us with these thoughts on the dignity of Dalits in India. Once again, the floor is now open for questions or clarifications. So as we had already agreed upon, so we shall have it for both, for Hugo as well as for Yesu Anthony. So kindly raise your hand and feel free to ask the questions.
go ahead.
Yes. Yeah,
Thank
go ahead.
you. Thank you, sir. That was a powerful presentation. I really liked the philosophical elements of the oppressed Indians and how do we unravel that. We have a long way to go. So that way, I'm glad you're using categories like Utopia at the same time, pitching it, through different organic intellectuals across the country, say Ravidas or Phule. So that was really powerful. So thank you so much for that. I have just a couple of quick interventions and I need your thoughts on this. I'm also beginning to write about Utopia. How do we understand, how do we connect? Gail Ambert's book, Begumpura, is one of the powerful, books that we know. It's through her I got to know about this in detail. Now, if you go into the concept of Utopia, it means, take for example, Begumpura, talks about Ravidas talking about the future, borderless, oppressionless, no suffering kind of future society. That means he is going through a lot of pain now. We understand that, and oppressed communities do go through that. But here comes my, the question that I am puzzled by is this. If caste is an imposition from top down, say from a Brahmin male, and that is mirrored by, say, different non-Brahmin groups, say Tevar or Vanyar, or whoever it is in Tamil Nadu case, is a mirroring, right? So you ask a Vanyar to talk about his past, the guy will shake after a few minutes. Likewise, Tevar, you cannot go, they don't have deep understanding that they're mirroring casteism, we know that. But my question is, if the caste is an imposed one, how do we unravel, say, for example, the positive history, positive memory of an Arundhatiya, of a Parayar? If she is not a Parayar, if she is not an Arundhatiya, who is she? Can she have a pre-Dalit past? What is her pre-Dalit past? What is her pre-caste past? Is some of the things I think clearly we are all struggling to figure out. But I think we should be open to a possibility of, look, we have had a positive past. We have had a positive memory. That has been inflicted and we've been, say, Parayanized or Palarized or Arundhatiyaized and whatever you may call, Malaized or, all that. So that I think we should be open to. That's one point. So Kiradi in Tamil Nadu, the archaeological industry might have some clue. We don't know. That's one point. The second point is that you put Ambedkar and Tas at the same level. I know a little bit about Tas. So based on that, what I feel, a major difference between them, of course, I went to Columbia University to do my PhD only because of Ambedkar, literally. I could have gone to any other university, but I chose. So I made that very clear. So my credit to I dedicate my dissertation to Ambedkar. I keep that there. But I don't say J. Beam and so on, primarily because of the sort of romanticization used the category J. Beam, particularly from Marathi friends. So I leave that. But when I compare Ambedkar and Tas, a major thing is, it's always a puzzle for me when Ambedkar said, I was born a Hindu, but I will never die as a Hindu. In contrast, Tas, if you read Tamil very carefully, about which I want to write, he interrogates the very category of Hindu. That was super for me. How the category is a recent one, and it's a fabricated one, how the Brahmin male is at the core, how the category Hindu doesn't serve for everybody. Now, if you take P.J. Marshall's study, The British Discovery of Hinduism, 1970 book of Cambridge University Press, the category wasn't even popular in the early 20th century. So that way, if you go, there is a contrast between the way Tas and Ambedkar understand the Buddhist past. Tas is for a more vernacular, diversified, regionalized Buddhism. I'm not sure whether Ambedkar had that kind of a deep understanding of positive history, positive memory. So if Ambedkar is here, I would sort of debate with our father figure, sir, how did you say, and so on. So your thoughts. Thank you. Sorry, I took a little long. I apologize.
Thank you so much for your nice contribution. What I personally feel, now we are talking about Dalit utopias or any utopias of the marginalized community all over the world. it has got a social setting, it has a context against which they try to strive for a new world order. And so therefore, the given situation, given reality in Indian society, that we have a caste, it's very, very virulent, very vibrant, and much more strong than many years ago. People can say that there is no caste, but for me personally, it is very, very strong right now. So therefore, now every situation, every period or every time, people like Ayati as a Pandita or Ravidas and many people, stalwarts, they were trying to fight against this. This fight is the reality that I personally feel. So it is an ongoing struggle, and this struggle will be going on and on and on. So every now it's our time to fight against it. So therefore, this utopia, it gives us a kind of a push, a kind of a direction, a desire. As I have been mentioning in my presentation, it is an ideology, it's a critiquing, it critiques, it demands a social change, it demands a new wine, it demands a new wine skin. Ambedkar's word, it is not constructing an India on the dunghill, which means on Hinduism, you cannot construct Indian society because according to the Indian Brahminical order is basically it's not egalitarian. So if there is no egalitarian, the Indian society cannot be thought of. So in that way, now how we have been earlier. What about our past? The Ayatida speaks about a casteless social order, where everybody with the buddhi, everything we were, enjoying liberty and freedom, and there were solidarity and equality between everyone. So as you have been mentioning, it is a recent past. It's a recent past. It has been forced on the society, Indian society. Caste is recent past. Brahmins are recent past. So they are not as they have been picturizing themselves as age old from many, many years ago. They have been here. So that has to be demolished. So as ideology critique and as structurally we are challenging, as we demand a new society, this utopian Dalit utopia, all your questions, I think it comes there and it disturbs and it is pokes their conscience, pricks their conscience and demands a new social order. This struggle is an ongoing reality, and that is the reality that we need to be part of it. That's what I personally feel.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Daneshwar, you can go ahead with your question.
Yeah, very nice presentation. So actually, this is a presentation based on dream and utopia and how Dalit construction for the dignity. So my question is that in these dreams and utopia, maybe we can refer Ravidas, Jyotiba Phule and Ambedkar. But Ambedkar's dream and vision for making nation was different from the Ravidas and other social reformer during that time. But if you'll go to their movement, like Ravidas movement, and in Odisha there was also a movement, anti-caste movement by Bhima Bhoi, who was from a religion called Alak Mahima Dharma. But during that time, it was a aim and a purpose to fight against caste or making a casteless society. But in present context, that is like merging with the present society, and that is not much active as that was in during that time. But in the context of Ambedkar, that moment he rose and led and established a democratic nation, and later on the space for the Dalits in the form of reservations has a transformation from there afresh to dignified life. But how do you react in the question like the dream and utopia made by Ravidas and like Bhima Bhoi in Odisha and other similar movements, why it lacks transformation in present context?
I personally feel, throughout the Dalit struggles in the history, every moment and every period, Not only Ambedkar, Ayatollah Pandit or Ravidas are a couple of people whom we know. But when we need to do a lot of research in every state, all over India, it was the Dalits who have began their opposition against hegemony, anti-Brahminical movement, anti-caste. All these things have emerged all over India, and the Dalit, the so-called Dalits, and they have been, challenging or arguing that the Purva Kodi status, Adi Dravida, Adi Karnataka, Adi Andhra, this Adi. So, Aloysius, one of his talks, he was mentioning this. Even when I met him personally, he was also pointing out this. The Britishers went away from India. It is because of the Dalit struggle. To that extent, the India was faced with so many movements and struggles and fights. So therefore, let us not compare Ambedkar or right. Everybody is unique, and they were the men of their own context. So what Ambedkar had the opportunities, Ayatollah didn't have. But according to his context, he was really far ahead of Ambedkar, I would say, because Ambedkar, he was English, educated, Western education, and he was exposed to power, everything. He had a different setup. But Ayatidas, at the dawn of modernity, and he could really emerge as a great revolutionary. So not only Ayatidas, I personally feel all over India there were many stalwarts are there, and we need to dig out. Even to speak about Ayatidas Pandita, it took more than 108 years, I think, from his birth, if we count. After 100 years, he has been, buried in the history by every politician, everyone, even Periyar. He was inspired from Ayatidas. It was he himself has mentioned. Dr. Gajendra Ayatur is here. He was, it is this was he mentions many things about this. So therefore, let us not compare. Every movement has got their own contribution, and let us not merge anyone with others. And everybody has got unique contribution to make, and let us put them in that particular period and context and evaluate how they have dreamed, how they have constructed their anti-caste struggle, and let us appreciate and what they have been lacking, what is lacking in Ambedkar, what has been lacking in Ayodhya Pandita. Let us continue to do right now. That is our duty. They are not a perfect human beings. They are not everything. We do not deify Ambedkar or Ayodhya Pandita, but they are a great model to us. In that way, there are many people have engaged throughout India. So we need to recognize that.
Okay, Kunal, if you can ask your question.
Yeah. Thank you for such a great presentation, especially for tracing this genealogy from Bhakti movement to from Ravidas to Ambedkar. This whole idea of utopia and how all these like different anti-caste philosophers have taken up this question. My like as you were saying that with Adi movement and it is like in Mark Juergensmeyer work on Adhidhar movement, it comes up that, and it was in connection to one of the question about archaeological excavations, and it was with the excavation with the discovery of Indus Valley civilization, that how the at least Adi movement, Adhidhar movement in Punjab and in the North India was taken up in connection to that. So, and because I work on Ravidasya community, so I would like to know, because Ravidasya community in the present is taking up the question of like Ravidas becomes not from a saint but a guru in him itself, and the religion is being generally invoked, and the idea of Begumpura is invoked in the mythologization of Ravidas through songs, through various narrations by the intellectuals from the community. So I would like to know, apart from just the ideas of these anti-caste philosophers, how in the present the community, especially in Tamil Nadu in connection to Ayotitas, is taking up and in their present resistance against the caste system. So it is, I would like to know those kind of invocations, whether through certain visual mythologizations or through songs or through texts in which it has been invoked. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah. No, as when we think about the situation in Tamil Nadu, from your question, I think not only in Tamil Nadu, in the entire Indian society, the marginalized community, it could be Adivasis or Dalits, I think they are all in a very precarious condition. That's what I feel. They are at the verge of losing their identity. Uh, so they are the dominant hegemonical, the group. They try to appropriate. That kind of appropriation is taking place, and the Dalits are divided, and the Dalits are incorporated into within the RSS frame or within the Hindu frame. All these things are taking place now. So therefore, again, the dominant ideology or dominant Brahminism is slowly again, it's emerging as a great giant to swallow the entire Indian society. The marginal cultures and marginal groups are slowly at the verge of losing their identity. And that is very strongly happening on the one hand. On the other hand, there are people we are fighting. Now, what happened? Somehow we have forgotten the question of annihilation of caste. We have been made to accept the caste, all, including Dalits, including Vidudalai Siruthaigal, including all, you would take over for that matter. Now, the real serious problem of Dalits or any marginalist community or Adivasi, they are Hindus. Okay, Dalits are Hindus. So now what happened? Everybody, because of this party politics, because of the parliamentary politics, our great Professor Hugo Gorringe has written Panthers in Parliament. He makes that very strong criticism. So they have changed from their main agenda of caste annihilation to Tamil identity or Tamil politics. Hugo Gorringe he was mentioning, writing about this. So there is, we are living in this condition. In that way, that is a very, very great task is ahead of the intellectuals and people like many scholars and thinkers. And we need to intellectually contribute. These are this kind of talks, this kind of reflections, kind of writings. All these things evokes still it makes the people to understand what we are exactly to do. So Dalit utopian construction, when we speak about the past people's understanding, now what we are doing, we need to construct a new utopia for our next generation. It's only a blueprint. It's only directives. It only gives you a kind of a push so that you are busy and engaged in a fight against the caste and anti-hegemonical process. In that way, I think we need to think about the new utopias, and the old utopias constructed by all those people, Ambedkar, Daidas, and Ravidas, everyone. It is very, very useful, very relevant even now. The spirit we need to take, and that could be the foundation on which we can lay yet another foundation, because caste is multi-dimensional, multifaceted. So therefore, you cannot fixate caste in one particular area. It is everywhere. It's like octopus. It's swallowing everything. So you need to, the women, Adivasi, Dalits, even Dalits among Dalits, everybody, whoever for that matter, now we need to come out with a subaltern, a progressive, a liberative kind of socialist ideas, which could, capacitate everyone to fight against the hegemony of caste.
Sure. Just sorry. Can I?
Actually, there's Hugo who's waiting. So we'll.
Yeah.
And we are running short of time. So
let Kunal follow up. He has a follow-up question, I think. So.
Okay. Yeah, Kunal.
No, I totally understood that, but can you slightly like elaborate on the present, like how the Tamil Buddhism and this movement this question is being taken up in the present by I'm sorry, I'm not very much aware of the Tamil Nadu's context, but in relation to Punjab's context, I was just thinking that because Ravidasya community is very strong, it's very visible, assertive through various ways, in through songs, through visual imagery. So just wanted to know about the context of Ayuti Das in Tamil Nadu. Yeah.
Very recently, 1998, late 90s, the idea, his writings has been brought out by Dr. Aloysius, a great sociologist from Tamil Nadu. And people like Dr. Gajendra Ayadurai is here with us. And slowly now, many people are trying to do their research. Ayuti as a Pandita. Now only slowly it comes out that now all this contribution now, it has got a kind of repercussion on the already established Davidian politics. Now it's real tight fight is emerged now. Ideological war is going on now. Now all that you have said all these years has to be remodified or reinterpreted. That kind of situation is slowly emerging. We need to do more research on this, and it will come. Buddhism now slowly is accepted as a part of Hinduism. That's how the Indian government has made it. Okay, so more or less, they don't differentiate. The ideals of Buddha is slowly, it has not been really taken to the people. It has been made part of Hinduism. That's what I personally feel. And here slowly now Buddhism is emerging here and there. That the Buddhist monks are there even in Chennai. They have a meeting, a regular meeting. Even some of the Jesuit priests, I think one priest is also joined as a Buddhist monk. And it is happening there. It is happening. And people are coming together. Now it is not Buddhism as such, the ideals. The Buddhism of Ayatidasa Pandita, basically it depends on, he founded it on the Tamil literature, the Tamil, Buddhism, not what exactly the Buddha taught, but he took the spirit of Buddha, if I'm not mistaken, Dr. Ayatidasa should explain this. He took the spirit of Buddha, but he founded his entire argument on the Tamil literature, like Manimekalai, Kundalagesi, Veerachoriyam, Chulamani. There are so many Tamil literature which has been sidelined, ignored, which has not been taught to us. I have been studying in Tamil medium. It has not been told to us except Manimekalai, Aimbaru only except that. No, they never speak about, which means even in the intellectual world, I think there is a conspiracy of hiding or ignoring all these rational, moral literatures. If slowly people are now doing research on this, I think Charles Dickens is also doing. And today in Pune, another priest, he was doing a doctorate on Ayatidasa Pandita, where he was explaining about one of the books, what the general society, ignored. Now slowly it is coming out. If the knowledge comes up, ideology is built up, I think certainly it's going to reorder the thinking pattern, and everything will have a kind of repercussions. And we need to fight, keep on fighting. An ideological war. We have to engage.
Okay.
Sorry, just a minute. Just to Kunal, just a quick suggestion. I wrote a piece last year that I can share with you. It's on a community that is still there from 1924. Ayotitas Tamil Buddhists are living in Karnataka. I did field work with them. And I've got a piece out in the journal History and Anthropology. I can share it with you. Please do write to me. I can send it to you. That kind of connects Karnataka and present Tamil Nadu. What is the sort of the descendants of Ayathitas? And so you might have something interesting to engage with. So sorry.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, Hugo, your question?
Yeah, thanks for a great talk. Yes, we really enjoyed that. Two quick questions, because I'm aware of time. Who, if at all, is at the forefront of Dalit utopianism today? So are there people out there who you see as offering a utopia today? And secondly, you're speaking from a Christian institution. In the background, you have the icons of the church. Where is the church in all this? What of liberation theology? So two things to think about.
Buddha is there. Buddha, Vallur is there. You know, now who will take up a leading role in constructing utopia in present society? You're asking. Am I right? I got your question. You know, we did not wait for a hero. I think someone, you know, a particular individual who could. I think it's a collective conscience. Everybody is going through. Even you are far away in Edinburgh, and you are, you know, as a man of conscience and a kind of commitment for the Malton, you are trying to give all your time and do all the studies and research and comes up with a different. I think that's how. I think I personally believe that we should not depend on any one particular individuals or groups to take up the lead. This is a multifaceted factor, the caste. So therefore, let us live with the multiple. For example, Adiyaman is making a kind of contribution. Let us make, let it come from different sources. And all you need more. You need to have more and more utopian construction or kind of ideologues or ideologies, theories, theorization. It has to happen, and through which I think slowly we need any one single utopia. It's only a kind of directives to push you. Now, Vidudhai Chiruthaigal, you know, when he spoke about Adichinorku, Tiruppi Adi, Tiruppi Tak, all those things, it was those 25 years ago. We were inspired by the talk, okay? And people have joined. And until then, the people have not joined together. And yet another important observation in Tamil Nadu, though Paraya community is a very big community, and they are not an organized group. All the other groups have been organized, but they are not organized group. Okay, so now slowly everybody is talking about that, and that kind of leading role, pioneering role, and all of us need to take. And there are people are doing through studies or parties, and we need to intellectually more. We need to intellectually contribute and build up this collective consciousness of the Dalit society. Consciousness has to be, the sensibilities have to be rekindled. And that we have to do, and it doesn't depend on one particular person, and we need to have more people to do that. Sorry.
Yeah. So thank you, Yesu Anthony, and thank you all for all your questions and interventions. So we have reached the end of this webinar. As always, this webinar would not have been possible without the efforts of many others. So I now invite Robin Sillen, the director of SNRI, to propose the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Lindsay. I will not take much time. We are already late by 5 minutes. Just give me 1 minute more. I would like to first of all thank all of us here present here for the wonderful conversations we have had in the past 2 hours. What is the takeaway from here? The takeaway is there is a strong sense of possibility of a new future. That is what comes out with the power of symbols and the power of utopias, and keeping alive utopian dreams, or keeping alive the sense of focusing on recognition and redistribution. I think we can definitely march ahead. So I found 3 things in both of you, Hugo and Yesu. There was a passion, there was a clarity, and there was depth. I would like to appreciate both of you, especially to you, Hugo, for your time, for your, especially you're on holidays, and thank you for taking time off despite your holiday season, and thanks for being here. Thank you, Yesu. As usual, you have come out with your hard work and with a lot of new insights. And thanks to other scholars who intervened today. I would like to really thank all those who asked questions. Also like to thank Satya for launching our 2 programs. And lastly, I'd like to thank our coordinator, Lindsay. Thank you, Lindsay, for being the MC for this program and for leading us all. Thanks to John, our office coordinator. He's not here, but we thank you all. Lastly, before I conclude, I invite you to join our mailing list if you have not yet done so. we will be very happy to inform you, keep you informed of our other programs in the future. Thank you and God bless.
Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. I'm sure that all of us have had an enriching session on the various themes that were presented by both our speakers today. And I thank you all for enthusiastically participating in this international webinar. I also invite you to have a look at the website of the Satanilam Research Institute for the latest updates and also for the events that will be organized in the future. Our next international webinar will be on the 21st of August 2021, that is Saturday. So this is me, Lindsay Lobo, signing off. Thank you once again and stay safe.
Thank you all. Thank you so much.
Dr. Hugo, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Dr.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hugo. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.